Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar on ISO 27001, the 2022 edition. What's changed, how do you adopt, and how do you actually transition to that standard? Just to let you know, we will be recording the webinar and sending this out to everyone after. And it's going to take about 45 minutes. So don't worry, it's not sort of death by PowerPoint, followed by any questions you may have. So please use the message function in the webinar for any questions, which I will cover off at the end. So let's just have a quick sort of recap on the agenda. I know that Carolyn very kindly sent that out earlier, but we're going to be covering sort of three main areas in the presentation. Now, as we've got quite a mixed audience, I know we've got people that have already got ISO 27001 and are looking to maybe transition and find out what's new. But we've also got people that are looking at adopting ISO 27001. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking around, why ISO 27001 is important and what it's all about. Then I'll be talking specifically about the new areas in ISO 27001 2022 version. And then talking a little bit around how you implement it from a new adoption of the standard, and then also how you actually transition to it. So let's begin. First of all, I just want to talk a little bit around who IMSM are. They're a UK headquartered company, and for nearly 3 decades now, they've been providing ISO consultancy services. Obviously, today we're discussing ISO 27001, but IMSM can also cover quality, environmental, energy management, health and safety, business continuity, as well as a whole other host of key ISO standards. Now, details can be found on the IMSM website, which is imsm.com, or feel free to reach out to me directly after this webinar, and I can fill you in on any details on any of the many standards that IMSM cover. They've got 3 offices in the UK, but also have a global reach with additional offices covering the US, Europe, and Asia Pac. And they've supported over 15,000 customers, helping them achieve over 25,000 standards. Now, what really sets IMSM apart from other ISO consultancy firms is that all IMSM consultants are what's called IRCA qualified, which is the International Register of Certified Auditors, and they adhere to the guidelines of ISO 9000. And that's really to make sure that the management systems that they help customers implement of these 25,000 they've already done before will meet both independent or UCAS, IAF or IAS certification. And also, IMSM are very proud to have achieved and hold the highest rating from the European Foundation for Quality Management, or EFQM as it's known. And that's really about recognising the quality and excellence of their work. And also, IMSM are obviously pleased to confirm that they've retained their sort of 5-star rating during the last assessment. So let's talk about why ISO 27001 if you don't already have that implemented with inside your business. Now, when I first started off in the industry, the information and data was stored in a nice little sort of filing cabinet, and Bill had the keys to the filing cabinet. And if you wanted information on your customers, your suppliers, I was originally a long time ago, a piano designer of all things. So if I wanted information on the latest designs, the intellectual property, I could just go to the filing cabinet and pull it out. But today we work in this extended ecosystem. We all have suppliers and we're all part of a supply chain. You might be supplying customers, or you might be buying third-party services from somewhere else and reselling that onto your customers. But everyone works in the supply chain. And that means the way we interact with businesses, we're sharing information, whether that be data, privacy information, personal identifiable information, but we're sharing that with multiple third parties. A lot of organizations, including ours, are using cloud services. Now, we've adopted cloud services because of cost, because of ease of deployment, because of speed of use, but security around cloud also needs to be addressed. And a little bit later on in the presentation, I'll talk about one of the new controls that 27001 2022 edition is specifically around cloud services and how you adopt them and everything like that. But businesses are moving and working in this really extended ecosystem. We're also using a lot more outsourcing, whether that's outsourcing of your account system, whether you're using a managed service from an IT company providing you desktop support or remote support on your services. And that means that you are again sharing information with this extended ecosystem, and it really needs to be controlled and protected. Obviously, we've all seen in the press about recent attacks, whether that be from the hacking fraternity, ransomware attacks, cyber attacks. But businesses are also looking, because they know about the extended ecosystem, that you will be sharing information and data with third parties, and are starting to target, and there's been some very sort of high profile cases around large third party software vendors and system integrators and infrastructure suppliers that have been targeted specifically for their customers' information. And these attacks are growing and continuing to grow all the time. But also businesses need to look at the governance and how they actually manage information, data and privacy of their clients, whether that's personal identifiable information or PII, and how's that actually managed? Who can get access to it? Where's it stored? How's it accessed? How's it data information classified? You know, can you meet compliance areas such as GDPR? And are you able to demonstrate that you have the right policies and the right processes in place that actually meets GDPR guidelines? Now, we get a lot of customers coming to us going, we've been asked by one of our suppliers that we must have ISO 27001 or ISO 9001 or 14001 for the environmental. And suppliers are now looking to mitigate the risks that they deal with or that they have with their supply chain by insisting that they meet the requirements of ISO standards such as 27001 for information security management. But also it's better business practice around governance, around protecting the information and data, giving the confidence to your stakeholders within your businesses, whether that be your employees, your customers, investors, or just the market as a whole, that you are looking after the privacy, the data and the information within your organizations. And, you know, if that's threatened or compromised, or people can't get access to the information to be able to do their jobs with inside an organization, the impact to any business can be absolutely huge. You can't meet your service level agreements with your customers because you can't access a cloud service, or you've been hacked, or you can't actually understand the process of managing PII and personal identifiable information. The impact can be absolutely huge and devastating to businesses. What I want to talk now is a little bit around the sort of indirect and direct threats that businesses face around information security. And it's not just hackers and IT security, it covers a whole host of other areas. Now, a lot of businesses have grown over time and might have out-of-date information security or information privacy policies. Their security might be quite loose around who can have access to what information, when and how can they actually share that information out to third parties, to customers. How do they actually manage that process there? You know, does the organization have all of their assets? That's not just necessarily IT assets, but all of their information assets as well. And how do they actually manage that? And I've said it before around access control. Who can have access to what information, under what circumstances, and when within the organization? And that's really to stop exfiltration of data and information from internally going externally to parties that you don't particularly want it to go to, I suppose. It's also looking at things like encryption and physical security around the buildings, you know, access control systems, cameras, etc. Now, everyone might work from home, and that's just not applicable. And when I talk a little bit more around the sort of new controls and the areas that addresses, we talk of what's called a statement of applicability, which is really narrowing down what's important to you as an organization. And it might just be, you know, proper adapted operational security, or you might have a change communication security. One day you can send information out, the next day you can't, because you've now got non-disclosure agreements with certain key clients and you can't share that information out. And these things might change. And they're the sort of direct threats. But then from an indirect sort of point of view, you may have information security incidents that have happened. How do you actually manage that? How do you cope? How do you learn from that incident and how do you make sure it doesn't happen again? And one of the new controls and some of the changes to the controls within there will actually address those particular areas. Now, again, I'll cover that a little bit later on. And you might have internal changes within the business. You might go in after new markets, new areas, new types of customers with new requirements coming in. And it's making sure that your information security management system meets the needs of your business and the way it's actually going forward. Or it might be you're looking to go into new areas and get new opportunities with new customers. And having ISO 27001 will enable you to be invited to the table to be able to supply new customers that are looking, as I said previously, around that supplier request of our clients, or our suppliers, sorry, must meet the minimum requirements of things like ISO 27001. But you may already have an information security management in place. But what you need, it may be, quite a basic system that you've been running for a long while, but can it identify all the information and data assets and personal identifiable information? Will it be able to understand what the threats are to you as a business? Not just generic threats, but what are the threats to you? And can you determine what they actually are? And will it then help you look at the vulnerabilities your organization may face from those threats and how you can assess those? And it's really about looking for the controls within inside ISO 27001 and meeting those relevant controls that will help you improve the information security within inside your business. Now, there are obviously other options as well, such as, but these are not really management systems. You've got things like Cyber Essentials, which is a simple checklist. It's a self-assessment model, and it's really aimed at small to medium enterprise customers that want to bid for UK contracts and get a general improvement of their cyber security. But it's not a management system. It's not looking at how you manage information security and what your processes and procedures are. It's just a checklist to make sure you meet the 5 key requirements of Cyber Essentials. And obviously there's also Cyber Essentials Plus, which that you do get a full independent review of your infrastructure. And that will be, your mobile devices, your desktops, your laptops, your servers, tablets, etc., looking at your network, and it will evaluate and make sure that you've got the securities in place and actually test that security. But again, this is a static evaluation and it's not a management system. And it's got, I suppose, limited acceptance outside of the UK. Yes, it is recognised outside of the UK, but it's not like ISO standards like 27001, for instance, which is a globally recognised standard. So if we just look at ISO 27001 2022, it's really about, today's organisations are getting increasingly vulnerable to security threats. And that's really, as I spoke around earlier, as our dependence on information system grows even greater. And it's really vital that organizations apply the appropriate controls to manage the risks associated with information and data. And really, by achieving ISO 27001, you can demonstrate that you are preserving the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of those assets for clients, for shareholders, for other stakeholders within the business, and also society as a whole. And information is an incredibly important and valuable asset to any organization, and it does require stringent protection. And ISO 27001 provides that. Now, ISO have issued this 3rd edition of the Information Security Management System Standard, which was done back in October last year, and will replace the current 27001 2013 through a managed transition. It's outlined the requirements for a 3-year transition period for all organizations currently certified. And during that transition period, both the 2013 version and the new 2022 versions will be valid during that time. But if you have 27001 and certified, you must work towards transition to that new standard before I suppose it's going to be the 24th of October 2025, which is part of that 3-year transition period that I said. So that's kind of what is ISO 27001, what are the threats, and what is the sort of value that it can help and deliver to an organization. But what sort of changed in the standard? I suppose the 2022 version now contains 93 controls, where it was 114 before. And organizations must consider these to gain compliance to the standard and also gain certification. The controls are now grouped broadly into 4 sort of key groups. You've got technological, which has 34 controls. You've got the physical elements of the security, which has further 14. You look at the organizational security, and that's around 37 controls. And then obviously people as well, because people are a key, I won't use the term security risk, but the people also need to understand what the security is around what they can and can't do. Also, 11 new controls have been added within the total of 93. However, as I said a couple of slides ago, not all of the controls will necessarily be applicable to every organization. But what we do is we help and guide you to determine this in what's called the statement of applicability. So it enables you only to focus on what's important to you as an organization. There's also been some minor changes to the body, which I'll cover off in the sort of next couple of slides, which is really looking at harmonizing the structure for a better management system. And as I said, I'll cover that a little bit later on. So what are the actual new controls that have come out? I won't go through these in particular order, but if you look at threat intelligence as one of the new controls, this can be utilized to prevent, detect, or respond to both internal or external cybersecurity threats. And of course, companies can produce their own threat intelligence or go to open source intelligence tools or buy third-party products that can do threat intelligence for you. However, more often than not, third parties are using organizations such as the National Cybersecurity Center or NCSC, and that's well with Google over there. They've got a lot of information on current cybersecurity threats that are actually coming. But you could also consider looking at not only that area, but also at technology and tools that can help you better understand the threats that your organization faces. And those threats might be internal or external, but one of the other areas is to look at third-party risk management, because often they have either access directly into your environment or they have access and you share data with them. So looking at what your third-party suppliers' security is also key. Obviously, ideally, you'd say, right, you must be ISO 27001. But if one of your suppliers doesn't have that standard in place, there are tools available that can look at the security of your third-party suppliers and give you a calculated risk model against those. And again, feel free to reach out to us afterwards and we can go through that in a little bit more detail. Now, as I mentioned earlier, many businesses, including ourselves, have adopted cloud service to enhance agility, reduce costs, greater scalability, and for the operation and financial benefits that cloud services deliver. However, businesses don't often have processes for how you acquire a cloud service, how you use them securely, how are you managing their use, as well as the process for leaving a cloud service. You may be with Google Cloud, but you might want to bring it back in, or you may be with AWS, or you may be with Azure. But also, how do you move cloud service providers? You may be on, I don't know, Salesforce.com, for instance, cloud service, CRM system, but for whatever reason, you may want to move to HubSpot. How do you manage that transition process of moving cloud service providers? Now, this new control sets out how you can protect customers' data and ensure that services are secure. And these are I'll give you a few sort of areas to just consider. How are the cloud service providers chosen and used? Who is responsible for governance on how the cloud service is used? How do you manage multiple cloud services if you're running 2 or 3 different types of cloud vendors? And how does cloud services fit in with the overall security strategy of your organization? How do you migrate from them or cease using those cloud services? And I suppose one of the other areas is, who's responsible for security? Is it you as an organization because you're using the cloud service, or is the cloud service provider responsible for the security? Obviously, I think personally it's a mixture of both, but this new control will help you address that, have the processes in place to actually make sure you meet it. Now, from a disaster recovery point of view, whether that disaster is a minor incident or a major disaster, businesses need to be able to understand the role that is played by ICT platforms and services in maintaining its business continuity. It's about looking at what the recovery time objectives are and the overall business impact analysis that can be done. And this really enables you to recover quickly and easily with the least disruption possible to the information security systems. And again, this is a new control that has been introduced into the standard. If you look at the next area, it's about how you control, or the next control, how do you control to detect and prevent both internal and external people who try to gain access into the areas that are deemed restricted. And that's really about making sure that you've got the necessary functional surveillance tools. The surveillance tools should protect against as well as consistently monitor for, I suppose, the following at minimum, the loss of any information. How can you actually do that? Protecting you against the theft of sensitive data. And that's all really to do with the monitoring activities. Any financial damage, theft of removable information assets, potential corruption of IT systems through malware, etc. How is that all managed? Now, configuration management, which is actually this was the fifth new control, requires you to draft and implement configuration management policies for both hardware and new systems, as well as your existing systems in place. And you really should look at considering, security configuration of any infrastructure, whether that be software, systems, hardware devices that hold any type of configuration data. Any software platform applications or solution systems. What's the roles and responsibilities for management of configuration? Do you have audit trails if the configurations is actually changed on your systems? Who did it? Why did they do it? And then monitoring of the configuration files as well and how they actually operate is really key to an organization. If you're changing your environments and you're changing your systems, being able to monitor why that was done, who did it, and what was the business reasons behind it or the security reasons behind it, helps you look at continuously improving the way you operate your systems. If you look at the sort of sixth one, it's really about new control as opposed to data deletion. And it's really about, I suppose, making it complement your existing data retention policies and procedures that you may already have in place. And it's really about being compliant to regulation and governance such as GDPR. I suppose it's, what are the maintenance tasks relating to the deletion and destruction of data and or IT assets? Are you using any software tools to do it? Are you working with any third parties? Like when, for instance, if a piece of infrastructure becomes out of date, are you working with a third party that will assist you with the destruction of that and the delete your actual data from it? Are they making sure that the disks are wiped, that there can be no data loss through that and through the third parties that you're actually working with? Now, the next one, which is data masking, is really used to protect sensitive personal identifiable information, or PII, beyond, this is the key message here, beyond a company's traditional data protection policies and procedures that you may already have in place. And data masking, I suppose, should cover as a minimum the legal, statutory and regulatory use and storage of employee, your customers and your third parties, as well as your suppliers' data. Now, The eighth one is really around sort of data leakage. Now, all businesses should ensure that they are managing potential data leakage, obviously. If data is accessed, transferred, or taken away by anyone unauthorized to do so, or malicious actors, those hackers that sit in their basements typing away, trying to get into your environments, then obviously the impact can be huge. And this new control really enables you to proactively detect and prevent the unauthorized access, disclosure, or extraction of information. But it does it through both external or internal people, and more importantly, systems as well. And that's what it's all about. It's about data leakage and how do you actually prevent that. The ninth control is really to help you to detect any uncharacteristic behavior and possible information security events. And it's about, I suppose, the controls regarding your network systems, the applications, which should be monitored for uncharacteristic activities, and the appropriate steps that need to be taken to understand any possible security events. You should also keep records of the monitoring that you're actually doing. And it should be retained for auditing as well as for defined retention period. And monitoring activities should cover at least the following, traffic, both inbound and outbound on your network. Who and what had access to your systems and applications? What has changed in any of the configuration? We spoke a bit about that configuration management earlier of your environment, and the logs for security tools if you're using them. And obviously user activity, who's logged on to what device, what set of data, what file systems, and tracking that user activity as well. Now, the 10th one is really about, I suppose, covering the increased number of cyber attacks, especially phishing, email, which target users to visit a website, that may have malware on it. That if visited could infect the user's device as well as the network and any other devices that are attached to it. And therefore you should have, the appropriate web security, because this is a sort of web filtering, web security that enables you to control and restrict what external websites can and cannot be accessed to prevent security threats. And the new control 10 will really enable you to, eradicate security risks. You don't want people going on potentially malicious sites. You want to control that through web filtering, that you have both whitelists and blacklists, for instance. That's a simple approach to do, but there are a lot of web filtering technology tools on there that are looking for keywords, that are looking for are you accessing a particular site? What is the reputation of that site? But a simple blacklist and whitelist of these are the authorized websites that the employees can go onto and use. And these are the ones that they definitely can't go on because we know they're malicious sites. But there are technology tools and services that can actually help you do that and do it. Now, I suppose the final one is looking at businesses that are doing software development. Is the code that they are writing secure? And again, you might think, well, we don't do any software development. And that's where the statement of applicability comes in, where we tighten down the scope of what the new controls you'll need to adopt within your business if you're transitioning from 2013 to 2022 version. And if your coding is not secure, then you expose potential systems within your environment, and ultimately information and data can then get access to it. Now, there are ways to address this if you're secure coding it, and doing things like penetration testing can lead to, looking at vulnerabilities within the software. But this is all about really developing the software with security in mind. And, security vulnerabilities are not there from poor coding. This new control is there for you to prevent security risks as well as potential weaknesses that may lead to a breach or a loss of information and data from poor software coding, and making sure that best practices are used and best principles are used to make sure this code is as secure as it possibly can be. So that's kind of the new controls that are actually within the environment, within the new management system. Like I said, not all of those will necessarily be applicable to you, and the statement of applicability will narrow the actual scope down. But like I said, there have been some sort of minor changes, and it's really, like I said earlier, it's better aligned with the harmonized structure for a management system in what's called Annex SL. So again, Annex SL. Of note, changes have been made to the following sort of ones. You've got 4.2. Who are the interested parties? What do they expect and need? These could be your customers, your suppliers, your regulatory bodies, or any other third party, because they will have a high expectation regarding information security management, and you need to meet those expectations. If you look at 4.4, what are your information security management systems? Are you running things like web filtering, which we spoke about earlier for the malware and the malicious sites? But are you running things like CASB, Cloud Application Security Broker, looking at how you manage cloud applications from a secure point of view? Email security, patch management, password management, data loss prevention. There are lots of different types of technology, but how are you managing those types of technology that you're using? 6.2 is really about what are the objectives for information security and what are you doing to achieve them? Everyone needs to have objectives in their business, and ISO is about continuous improvement. But I suppose a great way is to look at how you measure an objective. And, I personally use SMART metrics and SMART structure. And SMART is, S for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. There's no point in having objectives if you can't measure it. And if you adopt the SMART structure, it gives you a nice structured way of actually doing that. But again, our consultants will help when they're looking at that particular element. If you look at 6.3, which is, planning of changes relating directly to changes to the information security management system, and that you make the changes in a planned manner. And that's really to make sure that you're not just doing knee-jerk reactions, changing a management system, changing your information security policies and procedures, that you need to have a document and a record of the policies. And you have to use a management review team to sign off on your changes. You also need to update your communication plans with evidence of community taking place to the wider employers and make that available to the management system. Because if you change a policy of, you can no longer use USBs connected to the devices because we've locked everything down, you need to be able to communicate that in. Or you can't go onto these types of websites, you need to be able to communicate that. And planning of those changes and how you communicate them is key. If you look at sort of 9.1, how are you monitoring and measurement, and how are you actually doing that around your information security processes and controls? The methods of monitoring, measurement, analysis, evaluation, when the monitoring and measuring shall be performed, who's going to monitor it and measure it? And when the results from when you've done all the monitoring and measurements of the system shall be analysed and evaluated. And who shall analyse and evaluate these results? It's making sure that when you're doing any analysis of the environments, that you're actually measuring those and that they're being signed off by the organisation. Oops. Sorry, I clicked over an extra slide. Now, management need to be involved in ISO 27001, and it really needs to ensure that they are reviewing the policies and procedures, that they are looking at the key areas of the management system, and that they are actually signing off on those key areas of the management review. And it helps you really make sure it's done and the people are meeting at regular intervals. They follow a structure. They have a defined agenda, and it wants you to have management oversight that meets regularly and covers the core components of the standard. It's about a top-down approach. I suppose in the old days, a lot of ISO systems were put in place that were put in at the sort of mid-management level, and senior management never really got involved with them. But now there are areas where senior management need to get in and need senior management buy-in. And it's really that top-down approach, with senior management, and it's to ensure, I suppose, continuing suitability for the organization, as well as the controls and the systems that you're actually putting it in, and making sure that the management system is effective. Now, as ISO is all about continuous improvement, 10.1 and 10.2 are kind of a little bit linked together, but it's looking at to improve the suitability, adequacy and effectiveness of the information security management system. And how you actually do that through things like any non-conformities or corrective action through 10.2, as well as a whole host of other areas that we can assist you in actually dealing with. And it's really about making sure that if a non-conformity occurs, the organisation takes actions to control and correct it and deal with the consequences. What it helps you do is evaluate the need to, I suppose, for action to eliminate the causes of non-conformity as well, because they're one of the key areas. If you've got non-conformity, you need to eliminate those causes of it. And it helps you determine what the causes are of the non-conformity in the first place. And also to determine if there are similar non-conformities exist within the organisation as well. I suppose it's then reviewing the effectiveness of any corrective action you take and make changes to the information security management system. That's why it's about this continuous improvement. And I suppose if necessary, corrective action shall be appropriate to the effect of the non-conformities encountered. And you need to retain documented information, the evidence, what was the nature of the non-conformity, what were the actions taken, and what were the results of any corrective action, to make sure that your management system is always improving and delivering value to you as an organisation. Now, as I said earlier, it's broken down into 4 groups. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go through. I've gone into quite a lot of detail, I think, on the 11 new clauses and also the minor changes. What it's done now is group them into 4 sort of key areas. It's looking at how the organisational structure is done, how the people, physical and technological. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go through all 37 controls because we'll be here a long, long while. But some of the key ones that I've picked out is things like, from an organisation control, 5.22, monitoring, review and change management of supplier services. People want to change suppliers to get the best business benefits for their organisation. But that control helps you actually manage that and how you actually review that. And also 5.29, which is what happens to information security during a disruption. And that might be a minor incident. It could be that you can't get access into your building, in your environment. If your business is disrupted by whatever reason, how do you maintain your information security to make sure your business is protecting the information, the data and the privacy of your organization? If you look at the sort of people controls, there's, again, we've got 8, but things like confidentiality or non-disclosure agreements, what do you do about it? Do you have NDAs, etc.? Are they shared within the organization for your own employees, or is it just purely for suppliers? What happens if you have to terminate or change somebody's employment? What happens to people's access to the system, the information or the data, or if they leave or they have a different role within the organization? How is that actually managed? How do you make sure that people can only have access to the information that enables them to do their job without risking potential data loss or any information moving from outside the business? So it's looking at those sorts of people controls. Same as physical controls. Again, not applicable if everybody works from home, you're completely wide. There will be some physical, but how do you secure your offices, your rooms and your facilities? And how do you know this is effective and works? And that's 7.3 of the physical controls. Do you have a clear desk and clear screen policy, which is number 7.7? What is the policy? Can they just leave confidential information just hanging around? I hope not. Is there a process and procedure for locking laptops? Not just in the office, because people work remotely too these days and people work from home, but is there a policy for if they're working at home that they must lock their laptops? And these areas can look at the physical sort of security to make sure you're actually protecting your business. Then if we look at the technology controls, 8.7, protection against malware, is the business protected? Data leakage prevention. I know we've covered a lot of these on some of the sort of changes. DLP, not just technology, but what are the processes and procedures? And again, that web filtering, which is 8.23, can you or do you react with what users do? So that's kind of the changes, the new controls, the minor changes, and how ISO 27001-2022 is now structured into these particular themes. Now, what I want to do is just talk very quickly around how do we help businesses that don't have ISO 27001 currently, but are looking to adopt it. And then I will then very shortly after that, cover around how do we actually help you transition. So we have a very simple 5-step process designed to have the minimal impact to you as a business. And step 1 is a gap analysis. Look at where you are now, where you need to be in terms of the process, procedures and controls. Once we've done that, and that's typically for most organizations between half a day and 3/4 of a day of workshop, using again one of our IRCA qualified consultants, because they're the guys that perform these steps. What you will do after we've done the gap analysis, we've understood how you work as a business, we've gone through the controls and the policies and the procedures, you've maybe sent us some of your existing policies and procedures. What our consultant will do then is develop the documentation around the management system. And that is to take, you may have an existing policy around, what's a good example? Password management, for instance. Now, our consultant will look at that and he'll do probably one of 3 things. He'll go, yes, that's great. It meets the ISO 27001-2022 standard. I will use that policy as is. Great. That's the first one. Second one will be, doesn't quite meet it. We may have to change it a little bit and maybe a small tweak to it. But thank you very much. We've got that policy. We'll now build that into the management system, but it's got a slight change of it. And the third one is, it doesn't meet the standard. It never would. Maybe the policy was your password's got to be password 123 and you never change it. Nobody would do that, but hey. And then we would bin that, but rewrite you a new policy from scratch. Then what we do is once we've got the management system developed for you that is specific to your business, your requirements with that statement of applicability and scope's been brought down to make sure it does what you do as a business, we then come back and present that back to you. This is your management system. You now have to evidence and adopt it within your business, which is step 4. And that adoption process of using the system, rolling it out, making sure the people are trained, making sure the policies are clearly communicated, making sure if you've had to put new technology in to meet the standard that you've done it. Not all businesses do. We've recently just done one for a very large media company that didn't require any new software at all for 27001-2022. It wasn't because they had lots. They didn't have hardly anything. It was a startup. We've developed the process and procedures. The technologies can come on a little bit later to add value to you as an organization. Now, what you need to do with ISO is adopt that standard within your organization and roll it out and then evidence the fact you are working to the standard. And then the final stage is certification. Now, we can work with independent, and IMSM work with an organization called QAS International, or if you want UCAS certification through one of UCAS certification bodies, we work with lots of them from Lloyd's of London, BSI, AAC, URS. There are lots of ones that we work with and I work with to enable them to deliver you UCAS certification, because all the management systems that IMSM develop will meet both independent and UCAS accredited body. And then they will then come on, do the audits, external audit, and make sure you actually meet it. But that sounds like a lot of hard work, but IMSM do all the heavy lifting. We will, and I suppose it's done that way so you can focus on what you do best, which is running your business. We will give you that advice and guidance throughout. I've spoke around the assessment of your existing management system, or if you haven't got one, and we work with a lot of organizations, believe it or not, that don't have any information security management systems in place at all. And we're developing one from scratch with our years of experience for nearly 3 decades and the thousands of customers that we've got. that enable us to develop management systems that are bespoke to you but meet the standard. And we will design that and build that bespoke compliant ISO management system for you. We will give you all the assistance you require around the documentation and relevant processes and procedures, and develop those and write those up for you as well. And we will then supply you with the necessary documentation for you to have the management system and then start to look at the ways you can continually improve it. What we'll also do is instruct somebody within your organization to do an internal audit of your information security system to make sure, and the ISO standard, to make sure it meets it before you have that external audit as well. And the internal audits are very, very important. And we will give instruction to do that. But what we also do, and I'll cover that next couple of slides, is we can provide additional training around that, dedicated courses to get people qualified up to become auditors and do their own internal full audits. And then we help with that registration. Now, how do we transition? This is, again, 3-step process. It's initial consultation, again, that IRCA qualified consultant, where we'll sit down with you if you've already got 2013 version, and we will discuss any changes and what the impact to your organization will be. And then what changes need to be made to the management system, and what new controls will apply through that statement of applicability. So once we've done that, we will either create a new and or amend your existing management system. Now, you don't have to be an IMSM customer. You could be bought it from a different consultant. You might have been a BSI. You might have developed the system in-house for yourself. But we'll either amend your existing one or we'll create you a new one. Depends. And we'll then support you in the work that you actually need to do to undertake and roll out the new policies and processes and procedures, etc. And it's really there. After that, we then hand over the documentation to you, and you then again adopt it in the same way that I spoke around for a new client would adopt it. And then we arrange for your either independent, and we, like I said, we use QS, or we can bring in a UCAS certification body to actually help you become UCAS certified for ISO 27001 2022. And that's the transition process. It's very simple, 3 primary deliverables, and that's it. Now, we provide additional ISOs, which I said at the beginning. You can go onto the IMSM website. We do the internal auditor training, either group classes, individual training, on-site training, or remote site, dedicated to you. We can also provide managed services for those organizations that don't have the internal resource to manage it, and that might be doing things like the internal and the pre-audits for you, doing the management reviews, sitting down with the management team, doing the system analysis, looking at your controls, looking at ways we can improve it in that continuous improvement methodology for ISO standards. Or you might have existing ISO standards already and you want to integrate them into a integrated management system. Now, we've integrated lots of different standards, whether that be sort of the primary 3 have been sort of 9000, 14 and 45, integrating those. But we've also done 14,000 and 50,001, ISO 27001 and 9001. There may be other areas where we can help you to integrate management systems to, reduce the internal audit on you and only one set of documentation for you to manage. So if you've got multiple ISOs, you're struggling to manage those across your organization, talk to us and we can look at how we can integrate them for you. So I suppose in summary, it's about both the new standard, but as well as ISO 27001 in general. It's about protecting the information, privacy and data security of the assets that are important to you as an organization. Now, all external stakeholders and also internal, your own employees have high expectations that you are looking after their information and their privacy. I see it a lot in different leaks and things like that, where it's employee data leaked, as an employee and as a business owner, I want to make sure the data information is protected on me. If I share my information with other organizations, I expect them to look after it. When I was an employee for different companies and things like that, I have very high expectations, and all your stakeholders will have you. It's easy to implement as well as transition. I say it's easy. The process is easy. How you roll it out is really up to you, and to make sure that you adopt and you can evidence the fact that you can work to the standard. But one of the things that I always say around ISO, if things don't work as they should, it just means that standards aren't present. But what you don't want to see is that ISO 27001 is a cost. It's not. It's an investment. It's an investment in your company for 27001, to bring you to the table to help you win more business, increase cost profits, protect your customers and any other interested parties around the data that you're looking after for them, helps you, protect against potential fines, damage to reputation. Reputational damage can be huge for organizations, or other damages, other costs that are involved in relating to fixing problems that could have been fixed by having ISO 27001 in place, as well as, protect your brand at all times and protect your reputation. It's also an investment on your employees, because they have a clear understanding then of their roles and responsibility where information and data security is concerned, as well as helps them motivate and enhance the way they actually work, because they know what their roles and responsibilities are. It's also an investment in your customers. It demonstrates that you are a high quality company, that you'll have reduced security incidents, that risks, and you'll also improve the services and also meet and exceed service levels of your customers. And that's because that you're protected better and you've got processes and procedures in place that if you have an incident, how can you maintain the security still, which we spoke around earlier. And it's also an investment in your future as a business. Protect your customers' information and data, and so your business can continue to operate, prove your credentials to a global market, and helps you grow and develop your information security policies and procedures and management systems in a controlled and measured way. Now, there are a few potential next steps. We've got lots of further information on the IMSM website. You can also arrange an ISO benefits review with myself, which will drill down into the standard in more detail and look at what are the actual benefits to you as an organization. Or if you want an investment proposal, we can provide you with a fixed price investment proposal. What we don't do is time and materials. We will give you a fixed price to implement and or transition. And that's regardless of how complex or how long it will take. And it's always a fixed price from IMSM. I'd just like to say thank you very much for those who sat through the entire webinar, and I really appreciate your time. So next one is any sort of questions. So if you've got any questions at all, we've got about 9 minutes left until the hour's up. So feel free to put them into the chat window and I will cover them off. Right, doesn't look like there are any questions. So again, if you're still on board, I'd just like to say thank you very much. And as I said, right at the top of the presentation, we will be sending out a copy of this to you so you can watch it again or share it with any of your colleagues or people within your organization. So my name's been Steve Stobo, and thank you very much.